Welcome to Book Watch, the podcast where pages meet screens. I'm your host, Sarah-Daye. Each week, I'll be joined by amazing guests to dive deep into the world of adaptations, comparing beloved books with their cinematic counterparts. From faithful retellings to bold reimaginings, we'll break down what worked, what didn't, and what made each adaptation unforgettable. Whether you're a bookworm, a movie buff, or both, you are in the right place. So grab your bookmark, grab your popcorn, and let's watch some books. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Book Watch. I am so excited to kick off this podcast with a friend of mine, Scotty Sinclair. Thank you so much for being here. Do you want to give a little introduction on kind of your history with the Hunger Games and podcasting?
Well, sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to start by thanking you for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here. As far as my familiarity with the Hunger Games go, I have, told you this story off air, but for the benefit of the listeners, it holds a special place in my heart because it was kind of the first time in my life that I just watched the movie, apropos of nothing. I think one of my roommates at the time actually rented it at Redbox and brought it home. And it was just kind of the movie that we all sat around and watched together. I was riveted. I just ended up enjoying it so much that I went out to my local library. I got the book. I read it in like a day. Ended up getting the next two books and read like all three within the span of a week. So definitely really enjoy the franchise, and particularly that first movie for the special place that it holds in my heart. But as far as podcasting goes, I've been podcasting for, it's kind of crazy to say this now, but the better part of 5 years now. A lot of that has been focused around the Stranded Panda podcast network. So covering a lot of geeky and fandom content in terms of like the Marvel stuff. So their flagship shows, the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast. But for me specifically, we do a show called Multiverse News that talks about all the latest, greatest news in movies and TVs, not just the content, but like the behind the scenes stuff as well. So that's one of my passions there. And then animation deliberation. I've got a vested interest in animation. I like to draw cartoons and stuff like that. Always loved cartoons growing up. That podcast, we don't publish with as much regularity as we used to, but me and who I'm sure will be a friend of this show eventually, Zuhair, we get together whenever we can to kibitz and talk about what's going on in our favorite animated series.
Yes, Zoo has been trying to convince me to read the Kyoshi books, and
yes.
I'm sure that we will touch base on the Avatar universe at some point. But I do, you shouted out the Stranded Panda Network. That is how you and I actually met in the first place.
Yeah.
So listeners, definitely go check out the Stranded Panda podcast. It is a great group of podcasts over there, and join the Facebook group if you are into all things nerdy. It's a great place to be.
Definitely.
And I wanted to touch base on my history with the Hunger Games and why
I'd love to hear it.
My selection for my first episode of Book Watch. And that is because I grew up on Harry Potter and always went to the book releases, and then kind of fell off reading after I graduated high school and was in college. And then the Hunger Games book came out. I think it was, the movie had been announced, and so I was reading the book, and it was the first book since Harry Potter that really grasped me, and I was staying up way past my bedtime to keep on reading.
Sure.
And I was unfortunately not able to read the next two books because they were not out yet. But as soon as they were released, I got them. Again, stayed up way too late reading them. And additionally, this is one of my favorite adaptations. I think that the movie did a very great job adapting this book. So I'm excited to dive into that conversation with you. But before we do that, let's give our listeners a look at, let's introduce the listeners to this book and this film.
Sure.
The book was written by Suzanne Collins. It came out in 2008. And it was a New York Times bestseller for over 100 weeks. Suzanne became the sixth author to become the Kindle Million Club, which happened in 2012. So congrats to her. That's a really great title for her. The first film came out in 2012. It was directed by Gary Ross, and it was also adapted by Gary, Suzanne, and Billy Ray. And then the audiobook, I like to tell listeners who voiced the audiobook because I am an audiobook listener.
Okay.
Carolyn McCormick was the original audiobook narrator, and then Tatiana Maslany has
Ooh.
done a version. Yes, it is fabulous. Both narrators did a phenomenal job, but Tatiana, if you haven't seen Orphan Black, can really nail lots of different voices and characters.
Sure,
So
sure.
definitely give it a listen.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember any? You kind of came into the fandom a little late because all three books had already been published and the first movie had come out. Do you
Yes.
remember any of the cultural impact of this story and how it was received?
I recall the trailer. I want to say I saw the trailer when I went to go see the Avengers in 2012, and I remember thinking like that looks cool, but I didn't have the familiarity with it at that point in time. So that was a point in my life, and it's worth mentioning. I think I'm a couple years older than you. So while you were in college, I was kind of like fresh out of those years in my really early adulthood. So I wasn't as like connected to the zeitgeist in terms of like what might be popular with like younger people. I was kind of doing my own thing and kind of doing a
Sure.
lot of partying and stuff like that, so I wasn't super
As we all do at that age.
yeah, I wasn't super clued in. But I'm not sure if I underpinned this enough when I did my introduction. But what is really unique about this book for me is that it was actually the first time that an adaptation was so good that I went to seek out the book. Like previously with like the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, like you mentioned, I always made a point, and even with Dune more recently, I always made it a point to make sure I got those books read before the movie came out. But like I said, I did not really know all that much about this one outside of the trailer. I wasn't even the one to pick up the movie. It was my roommate. But once it was on the screen, I was just so taken with it. Like I instantly did a lot of research and ended up like learning about some of the comparisons to like stuff like Battle Royale. And I ended up going and
Mm,
watching that movie as well, which I think the comparisons to that are kind of surface level. Just to give listeners a clue into that, it is a similar story, but it takes place in Japan. Kind of similarly, pits an
hmm.
entire like group of classmates together, and it's kind of like the last one standing wins. But apart from that, those are the only real similarities. That takes place in present day and everything like that. So I kind of found out after the fact, like what an impact it had. And once I read all the books, I kind of found out online all of like the fervor and ranting and raving that was taking place. So I was a little late to the party.
Yeah. But that's okay. You're here now.
Yes, yes.
I'm sure listeners are aware, but the original trilogy is The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and
Hmm.
Mockingjay. Mockingjay was split into two films. And then we have one prequel. Well, at the time of this recording, we have one prequel. By the time this airs, we will have two. The first
Hmm.
prequel is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which has also already been a film. And then we are getting The Sunrise on the Reaping, and the film will be coming out in November of 2026, if I am not mistaken. So
Okay.
it lives on. I mean, it's
Yes, it
still
does.
coming. It's still coming out with books and films. And I do want to mention, I want to give Suzanne Collins credit because she has said that she's not just pumping out books to pump them out for money.
Mm,
She was only writing books when there was a story to tell. And I
okay.
do appreciate that. I do think it's funny that there's already a film for Sunrise on the Reaping, but I am not complaining because it gives me something to talk about on the podcast.
Yeah, and don't quote me on this, but I think I remember reading somewhere Suzanne Collins. Not only is she an author, but she's also a television writer. And she had written a trilogy of books before the Hunger Games. So I think she
Yes.
went into the Hunger Games with kind of like the hope that it would be quickly adapted with her connections. And I actually think she, not to get too far ahead here, but I think she wrote it in a way that made it lent itself to adaptation. She provides descriptions, but she never goes like overboard. Like she kind of leaves a lot to the
Yeah.
imagination, which I thought really lent itself to an adaptation.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, this is one of my favorite adaptations. So I think that's why. She probably did go into this. And we'll get into it in our next episode, the nitty-gritty of
Sure.
the key plot point. What I liked most about this adaptation is sometimes directors cut or screen screenwrites cut things that shouldn't have been cut and add things that shouldn't have been added. But I don't think that happens a lot here in this
Yeah.
movie. I think what was cut was fine for the
Yeah.
medium, and they didn't kind of get lost in the story. The points that needed to be made were made, and
Yeah.
characters that were cut didn't really add that much to the book. Of course, the book is always going to be more in depth because it is a
Sure.
book and you get more into their heads because
Absolutely.
you can. But I really do think the adaptation was one of the best that I've seen.
Yeah, I agree. I think all of the pivotal scenes are translated. There were a couple of like side characters that I missed a little bit. There were a couple of asides and anecdotes. Like it would have been nice to see those translated to screen via flashback or something like that. But I really do agree with
Sure.
you. I think in terms of like what is essential to take from the book and get on the screen to tell this story. I think they did that. And then even in with some of the ways the choices that where they added stuff or maybe changed things rather than just omitting, I do think they were strong choices as well and they worked for the screen. And I, to your point, I think that's what
Hmm.
makes it such a strong adaptation. And like a lot of times, the general consensus is the book is always better. And I don't think you hear that as much about this one. I think this one is one of like, yeah, sure, you get to spend more time with certain characters and really get in their head in the book, but by and large, I think this is one of the best received adaptations out there.
Right. And I think the actors really do a good job of portraying the thoughts that we get from the book in their facial expressions a lot of
Yeah,
times throughout the film. And so I think that we're not missing that. Like we're still getting that in the film, even though we're not hearing those thoughts played out. I think we're still getting that emotion from them.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, Jennifer Lawrence. Uh, there's a few of her like line deliveries. I thought like she really paid attention to the way it was described in the book because like I think when she cries out Prim that first time at the reaping, the way her like voice like cracks and breaks, I'm like, that is exactly how it's described in the book, and everything Katniss was experiencing in that moment, I'm believing in this moment right now.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, and this really shot her to stardom. This
Oh yeah,
series,
yeah,
so
yeah.
and deservedly so.
Oh yes,
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the key themes and
sure.
how the key themes from the book and how they made it to the film. And do you think that the film captured the essence of what the book is trying to tell?
I'll start. Well, I guess let's start with the themes. Yes.
Sure.
Severe poverty, starvation, oppression, the effects of war, hope, self sacrifice, government control, personal
Mm-hmm.
independence, and all of it is wrapped in this biting and incisive satire of reality television, reality
Yes.
TV series. So,
And the
in that
ethics.
sense, what's that? The ethics.
Yes, the ethics of reality television.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, just kind of listing off all of those, I think they do a pretty good job of getting all of those themes across. Maybe some of the aspects of like the severe poverty and starvation, if we could have spent a little bit more time in District 11 and like, seeing the difference between the seam and the town and the hob, maybe we could have gotten a little bit more of that. But they have a lot of story to tell in a limited amount of time, and it is a 2 hour and
Right.
20-minute movie, but I think they pack a lot of it in there effectively.
Right. And I do think that I agree. Would have liked to spend a little bit more time in 12, but I
Oh,
think
I said 11.
the
I'm sorry,
visuals,
12.
the the visuals and the music and what they did show does get that point across, especially with the contrast when Katniss and Peeta are entering the train for the first time and they're just looking around at all the nice furniture in the train. And then we get to
Yeah.
the Capitol and I was watching the film today and I was like, man, those chairs are wild. And they're this green wicker esque chair. And so the contrast, even in the coloring of
Mm,
the seam versus the capital, really gets across the difference in financial stability.
yeah. Yeah. And again, let me know if I'm getting too far ahead of myself here, but I do think it gets the themes across effectively. But one of the things I was kind of like struck with watching the movie this time around is I think the I don't know. I'm going back and forth here because I'm thinking of two specific characters. I'm thinking of Effie and I'm thinking of Cinna, and I think
Hmm.
the book does a better job of being a little more apologetic to Effie and giving her some redeemability, where the movie doesn't really go there at all. I don't think. Eh,
I don't think this one does.
Okay,
But if you come back for the other sequels, I think we'll
sure.
have a really good conversation about Effie and the
Okay,
changes they made to her character in the film. And I
okay,
like what they did to her character in the film. And I do think they make her more apologetic in and more understanding and more of a nuanced character in the
okay,
films than she is in the books.
okay.
Um, when I reread this for the podcast, I couldn't stop and I read the whole trilogy, and I hadn't read the trilogy in a while, but of course I've seen the films multiple times, and I was shocked at her character, but I won't get too ahead of ourselves yet.
Right. And then just kind of, the other character I'm thinking of is Cinna. And I think
Mhm.
kind of like oppositely, I think the book did a better job of giving some more of the nuance there and why the relationship and why he was so endeared to Katniss the way he was.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that I would have liked to see a little bit more of their relationship in the film.
Yeah.
But speaking of characters, let's dive into
Sure.
our key characters and
Mm-hmm.
who played them in the film. Of
Sure.
course, Katniss Everdeen is first up, played by the wonderful Jennifer Lawrence.
Mm-hmm. J Law herself.
Yes. What do you think of? I mean, I guess we've already really talked about her performance. We think she really nailed it. But do you have anything else to add?
No, I really do think that she, like we said, she nailed it. She does everything. She is a fierce and a fighter, but you also get those tender moments and the vulnerability. She
Mhm.
does a really good job. And I think, all things considered, like thinking about the novel, we get to spend so much time in her head. Like in the movie, I don't think we get all that much dialogue from her. So, like you said, it really is
Yeah.
like so much of it is just from her facial expressions, and it's such a physical performance. And I think they really
Yes.
chose the perfect person to do all of that.
Yes, I agree. I agree. So Peeta Mellark, Josh Hutcherson plays Peeta. Thoughts on Josh?
He's a really talented actor. On the second viewing, he still works for me, and I do think he works for PETA, but I think he may. I'll have to see how I feel like with the subsequent movies and stuff like that. But I did find myself thinking he was a little bit miscast in this one, just because like even though I had seen the movie and read the book, when I was rereading the book, I couldn't help but just have like my own interpretations based on Suzanne's descriptions. And while Josh Hutcherson is stocky, I thought I just imagined him a little bit bigger, like more physically intimidating compared to Katniss. And I think Jennifer Lawrence is just a much taller
Yes.
person than Josh Hutcherson, so he just looks a little diminutive around her. But other than that, no, he hits all the emotional beats. Not from his performance per se. I thought the romance worked a little bit better in the book than it did on screen, but that's just because of like the economy of the screen time. They didn't really have as much time to devote to
Sure.
that. But he works. He works for me.
I think he works fine, but I do agree. I think he could have been better cast. I don't fault Josh Hutcherson in his acting at all. He's a great actor. I've seen him in a lot of other stuff. And I
Sure.
do think that he acts well in this film, but I agree with you. Look wise, I everything that you said, I agree with. I just don't think he really nails the PETA look.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, like both of the main characters, their eye colors are kind of swapped. Like in the book, we
Ah,
hear that she's supposed to have gray eyes and he's supposed to have blue eyes, and that's kind of he has brown eyes and she has blue eyes, and this, which
mhm.
minor gripes, but
Right, minor. Right. Okay, so Gail Hawthorne is next, played by Liam Hemsworth. I just have to say I have a bias against Liam because
Do
of
you?
Miley Cyrus.
Oh,
I'm
right. Okay.
so yes, and I'm so team Miley. So seeing Liam as Gail, and I mean, you're not well. He's an interesting character to love or hate anyway, so I guess it works for me. But it is rather hard to see him as Gail.
I agree. When I watched it back in 2012, I didn't have a problem with it at all. And he was one of those performers that he never really stood out super well to me, but I never really had an issue with him. And it was like in subsequent years, I started to like see people online kind of like ragging on some of his performances. And I think I may have had some of that like in the back of my head as I was watching this time around, but I could not help but notice he's Australian. His American accent is the exact same American accent his brother does. Like,
Right.
I was like, all right, okay, it's a choice.
Well, I'm sure they have the same God, I'm sure
Vocal
they have the
coach, or
same voice
yeah,
coach.
yeah,
Yes. Okay, so we'll leave Gail alone. Next
okay,
up, Hamish Abernathy, Woody Harrelson. Tell me your thoughts.
yes. I thought he was perfect. I thought he was pitch perfect. He nailed the gruffness. They kind of dance around the alcoholism in this one, but you get the sense that he's certainly shouldering a burden in terms of like survivor's guilt and having to built
Yes.
up a way to numbing himself to seeing so many of these kids come through the system and lose their lives so quickly. The wig, I think they could have gone without the wig. Like, I don't remember
Yeah.
any strong descriptions about his hair from the book, so the wig was like a little distracting in the first scene, but I got over it pretty quickly.
Yes, and I do like the hair being shaggy like it is, but I
Okay.
agree, the wig on this, the rewatch today, I noticed that, and I was like, that's definitely a wig, isn't it? So, yes, but I do agree. I mean, Woody, again, the cast is a great cast all around. So they
Hmm.
really did a great job getting some firehouse actors in here. But
Definitely.
I think he really does nail the Haymitch character. And I'm very, very excited for his story coming up.
Oh yeah.
Um, okay, Effie, we mentioned her a little bit, but let's get into Elizabeth Banks' portrayal of Effie.
Yes. I will admit Elizabeth Banks is one of my favorite performers. I may have a little bit of a screen crush on her. Um,
How
I feel
can you
like
not?
yeah, exactly. She does a good job. I feel like she's lost under the makeup a little bit and the accent. And like, I noticed in the book, like they describe the capital accent in such detail. Like, I was actually almost imagining more of like a Valley Girl accent based on the way they
Mm,
describe it in the book. Like, they talk about the uptalk and ending everything in a question, but she decides to take on more of like a posh British
hmm.
kind of affectation. And I think it's kind of limited to her and some of the people on like the beauty team. But apart from that, you don't really hear the accent anywhere else. President Snow doesn't have it. I don't think, any of the other game makers or anything like that have it. So, but that's okay. It's I think it would be a little overbearing if we were hearing that accent all the time. But she's basically a cartoon, and she does it well. I kind of alluded to. I think the book gives her a little bit more. Uh, you start to see some of the conflicts that she's having, or she's warming up to like actually seeing these tributes as people, and starts to voice
Yes.
some of those things. And you don't really get any of that in the movie, but that's okay.
Well, I think you do get a little bit of facial expressions from her
Okay.
caring about these two.
Sure.
It's
Okay.
very, very subtle. So I'd like you to
Hmm.
rewatch it and see if you can see that on another watch.
Okay.
Because I do think there's some looks every once in a while. She'll give a little look, and I can see that being her starting to care for Katniss and Peeta.
Okay. Okay. I will rewatch and keep an eye out for those subtle facial expressions.
You mentioned that Effie was more of a cartoonish character, so I want to jump down. He's last on my list, but very much an animated character, and that is Caesar Flickerman, played
Oh
by
yeah,
none other than Stanley Tucci.
the
Another
Tooch.
very animated, another very animated character, but I think Tucci really nails that character.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's perfect. He is pitch perfect. He does the presenter. Dancing on his toe, taking these attributes that may be nervous or misspeaking, and he's able to spin that into something wildly entertaining. And he's just so gleeful about the whole thing. And I know we're not here to talk about any of the prequels or anything like that, but I was really happy when I saw that they cast Jason Schwartzman as the younger version, because I'm really. I shouldn't be as particular about it, but I get kind of hung up when casting doesn't look alike. So when they do it,
Yes.
when they nail it, I really appreciate it, and that's an example of nailing it.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah.
I also really dislike when the younger version doesn't match the older version.
Hmm.
Um
No,
so
well, just
go
and let
ahead.
me know if I'm getting ahead of myself here again. But one of my favorite things about like the film adaptation is some of the ways they used his character in terms of
Yes.
like being able to provide exposition and commentary. Like, a lot of that
Yes.
came from Katniss in the book, but it was helpful to have
Exactly.
somebody doing that for us as viewers.
Yes, particularly the first thing that came to mind when you mentioned that was the tracker jacker
Oh
and
yes, exactly.
explaining what the tracker jackers are. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, and I
yeah,
think
yeah.
you need that. You need to be able to explain, and that's the perfect opportunity to use it. I mean, it is a reality TV show. That's what they would do.
Hmm.
And I do like, again, yeah, I know we are getting a little ahead of ourselves, but the flash back, the not flashbacks, but going back and forth between Katniss in the arena and then everybody watching it as a reality show and getting that look into what's happening on the other side while she's in the arena and
Right.
getting that exposition, like you said. And I think they did a really good job of they did a really good job of making this book a movie, and I think this is why it's one of my favorite adaptations.
Agreed.
President Snow next, played by Donald Sutherland. Really, really appreciated his take on President Snow.
Yeah, this is one of those instances where I kind of wish I had read the subsequent books to get more of the Snow character, because that was one of the things that surprised me rereading the book. He has a presence and a looming presence, but he's really not given that much. Like, he has a speech or two, and he's like seen in the crowd, and he gives their crowns at the end, where he gives like a glaring, threatening look. But apart from that, we really don't get all that much from Snow. He's kind of like the Emperor in Star Wars. Like, you hear about him, but he's not the big villain until later on.
Right. And let me scroll back up in my notes. I don't have the publications of the second two of the trilogy, but I'm glad they gave him more screen time in the film, because he does become such a bigger presence in the books. And he, when the rebellion starts and everything, and it's Katniss versus Snow, it would be for the film, it would be kind of odd for him not to have such a big presence in the film and then be the big bad of the second two if we didn't get more of him.
Yeah. But I think Donald Sutherland does a great job with limited material there. He's got a few exchanges with a certain character that I won't reveal at this point in time, but in those exchanges, he's able to, deliver the menace and the threat. And it's like,
yes,
he's saying things with a smile, but you understand his intention.
Yeah, and I think particularly the scene with him and Seneca in the garden or whatever, and like Seneca, you can almost feel the tension and that like gulp of fear that he has. Like, my life is on the line now.
Yep.
Okay, switching gears here, going from the menace to sweet innocent Rue, played by Amanda Stenberg.
Oh, I think it's Amandla.
Okay, thank you for correcting me.
No problem.
Amanda Stenberg. Thoughts on her portrayal of Rue?
I feel like I'm a broken record here, but she nails it again. It's one of these characters that in the book we're given a brief description, but so much of the character is brought to life through her interactions with Katniss. And I thought even though the book does a better job of like hanging a lampshade on it, the similarity between Rue and Prim, I think Amanda Stenberg taps into that perfectly. She instantly feels like a little sister that we all want to be so protective of. And it is heartbreaking when she meets her fate. It hit me in the book and it hit me on screen.
Don't make me cry.
Sorry.
I'm sure we will in episode 2. Yes, I think broken record. Everybody really nails their parts. Even if they're not the best cast, the acting is just so good throughout the whole film, and hers in particular really gut punch when it needs to be in that moment. So speaking of Rue's character is the Katniss's link back home because it reminds her of her sister Prim. So Primrose Everdeen, played by Willow Shields. I actually think this might be the most miscast. Not miscast, but I don't think Prim's character hits as hard for me in the film as she does in the book.
Okay. I don't feel as strongly about that. And again, I doing that without the knowledge of like future installments, like I'm kind of fuzzy on them. But in terms of like the purpose that she served in this movie, I actually thought it was pretty effective because, and again, a lot of it is kind of limited to very emotional reactions. But when she kind of screams out no for her sister both times when she's being taken away at the reaping, as well as when they get the 3 minutes to say goodbye to her, like those emotional screams, no, like they did strike a chord with me. They hit me in the heartstrings. And I really felt that. So I thought it was a good performance, but it's I can see where you're coming from too. There's not a lot there. So
that's true. Maybe that's just what it is. And maybe I am pulling from the second 2 books and 3 films, but I'll give it another try. And she did do a good job. It wasn't emotional at the reaping. You are right there. Last up is Cinna, played by Lenny Kravitz.
Yes.
Which was a shocking casting for me back in the day.
Was it?
I mean, not him as Cinna, but I didn't know that he was an actor.
Right.
I know
Yeah.
Lenny from his music.
Sure.
And so, but all of that to say, as shocking as it was, I loved him as Cinna.
Yes. Yes, I did too. And thinking back on my comments earlier on when I kind of forecasted some of my feelings about the book version versus the movie version, I still maintain that, but I'm right there with you. I think in a very short amount of time and very limited screen time, Lenny Kravitz he delivers that warmth and that
Mm.
admiration of Katniss, and I don't think they get as many exchanges. To relate what he's doing for her and how he's basically
Mm-hmm.
empowering her through his efforts. But I do think that comes across through just his screen presence and the interactions that he does have with her.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that's it. Unless there's anybody else you would like to point out actor wise, that is the list that I have written down.
Just give a quick shout out to Jack Quaid. He pops up in so many
Yes,
things
of
these days. It was
course.
funny to see a younger version of him. I forgot that he was in this
Yes,
thing.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And listeners that may not know, Jack Quaid is District 2, the male tribute from District 2, and he is one of the main characters of the Amazon show, The Boys.
Mm-hmm.
So let's wrap up the conversation. If there's anything else you'd like to say, you can do that now. But the main question to wrap up is our initial impressions of the film. Why was it chosen? Why was this book chosen to be an adaptation? And do we think, I've already answered this, do we think that this was a good adaptation?
Yeah, in terms of why it was selected for adaptation, I think in combination with what I mentioned earlier, I think Suzanne
Mm-hmm.
Collins was very intentional with the way she wrote this and some of her connections. I also think you got to look at the timing. It was kind of perfect timing. Harry Potter, we
Mm-hmm.
mentioned as an influence. This was happening right around the same time that Twilight was being such a
Yes.
massive success. So I think it was it was built to kind of be successful, and it kind of came right at the perfect time. And I think you can look to like some other adaptations that like fit in the same genre in terms of being like young adult dystopia. The Maze Runner comes to
Mm-hmm.
mind, Divergent comes to mind, and I
Divergent.
would
Yep.
argue like neither one of those are quite as successful as this trilogy. So they really did kind
Well,
of sneak in.
Divergent didn't even finish the
Oh, I know.
films.
I know. Yeah, they kind of sputtered out there towards the end. But yeah, I mean, that just
Yeah.
kind of proves my point, though. They kind of, the Hunger Games
Right.
snuck in at the perfect time and struck while the iron was hot. And they kind of like capitalized. Like when I think young adult dystopia, I kind of think Hunger Games. Like they're
Exactly.
synonymous. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I can't argue with anything that you said.
Okay.
Any other any other final thoughts?
No. If I guess I would just say, if for some reason you're listening to this and have not watched the movie, go watch the movie. It's a great movie.
Yeah, it really is. Yes. I would assume most of my listeners are here to compare and contrast the books
Sure.
and the films, but some might just have seen one or read one. So this is definitely one that deserves both a read and a watch.
Oh yeah. Agreed.
Okay, well, Jay Scotty, thank you so much for watching The Hunger Games and reading The Hunger Games with me. Next week, we are going to be diving into more of the key plot points, and I'm very excited to do that.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Is there anything you would like to share? I know you said some of your podcasts up front, but would you like to say those again here at the end?
Sure. You can check out Multiverse News wherever you get your podcast. We publish every Wednesday morning, though that's actually may change with Daredevil Born Again releasing. We may have to change our release date a couple of times, but we're there every week. So look forward to that. And then Animation Deliberation, wherever you get your podcast as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much, listeners. We'll see you next week. That's a wrap for today's episode of Book Watch. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the world of page-to-screen adaptations. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share it with your fellow book and movie lovers. If you'd prefer to watch along, you can check the show out on YouTube. You can follow the show on Instagram at Bookwatch Podcast, and you can follow me, Sarah-Daye, on Instagram at captain.mcd. That's MCDEE. You can also join the conversation in the Book Watch Lounge on Facebook at www.facebook.com/groups/bookwatchlounge. If you would like to support the podcast, you can join the Patreon at www.patreon.com/bookwatchpodcast. Tiers start at only $4 a month, and I'd love to have you over there. If you have a favorite adaptation you'd like to cover with me, I'd love for you to apply to be on the show with the contact form on our website at www.bookwatchpodcast.com. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and I'll see you next week.